What is going on, my friends? Welcome back to the channel. It's about 24 hours after we laid out the primer on all of the wide body panels. Just went through and wet sanded the first panel with 400 grit with a soft flexible block. And if you guys remember back to the last video, we had some pinhole issues. So I went through and I dabbed each pinhole with a black Sharpie just so it's easy for you guys to see and for me to see when I go ahead and lay some glaze down. But we have like probably 20, this is the worst panel by far, about 20 pinholes on this whole entire panel. So the current plan is, and I don't know why this wouldn't work, is go through, wet sand each panel, 400 grit, identify where the pinholes are, and honestly, they're not super bad. If we went ahead and just laid base and clear down on top of what we have here, I'd probably be happy with it, but I want to make these as perfect as possible. The plan, wet sand everything 400 grit, figure out where the pinholes are, go through with our icing glaze everything in, let that harden, takes about 15 minutes, sand that off. We would probably be safe to paint right over that, but for safety measures, I'm gonna go through with some high build primer, spray each area that we glaze with a little bit of primer just to make sure we don't have any pinholes left, get everything nice and flat, smoothed out, sand it again, of course, and from there we should be good to go for paint finally. All the panels are finished up. Everything is marked out where we need to apply filler. A couple areas here and there. Yesterday I did research on what would potentially cause pinholes in glaze and in body filler. A lot of people online were saying that you should never mix body fillers on cardboard because it could introduce air pockets into the filler. And then once you go to apply it, you'll get those little pinholes. So I'm gonna run to the one and only Harbor Freight. It is so freaking hot in here. I'm like sweating. It's nice, but miserable at the same time. Warmer it is, the faster stuff dries though. So I'm gonna run to Harbor Freight, buy a mixing pellet, I guess you'd call it, get some glaze mixed up, get it slapped on there. While we run to Harbor Freight, I'm gonna run by Northwest Auto Glass with our rear hatch, and we are gonna have them remove the rear window out of this thing so we can get this prepped out and ready for paint as well. It is Friday. I have no idea if we're gonna get parts sprayed this weekend, but if we do, it would be nice to be able to do this at the same time. So let's get that loaded up in the back of the truck, head out to Northwest Auto Glass, Harbor Freight, gas station to buy a Monster and get some parts finished up. So we ran to Northwest Auto Glass, had that rear window removed, did a good job. Shout out to them, thank you guys. Went to Harbor Freight, got the stupid aluminum mixing board, which I would not recommend. I would highly recommend something like these plastic spreaders, so when the filler gets stuck on there, all you gotta do Let's see if I got one here with some filler on it. You take it, you bend it, and it cracks, and then you just peel it off. So don't buy an aluminum one, I'd buy a plastic one. Regardless though, we got all of the pinholes filled. I actually ended up using just a rubber glove on my finger and dabbing each hole, kind of like forcing it into the hole, sanded it smooth, everything is good to go. So all of these parts are gonna get just a touch of filler primer on the areas that had those pinholes, just to make sure they're good to go. Last thing I want is to be spraying these parts out and start running into issues when we're doing sealer or base or something. Last thing we need to do is go ahead and sand all this smooth. So these are the front bumper extensions for the wide body kit. We epoxied these bolts in a couple days ago. Maybe it was yesterday, I'm losing track of time, but we need to get all that sanded flat. Bondo, sand, putty, sand, primer, sand, good to go. Let's get them knocked out. All right, nearing the end of the day already. It's crazy how long this freaking prep work takes, but we are ready to lay down some primer again. We got that panel finished up, that panel finished up. Those are the two front bumper pieces. The main things we needed to finish today. Everything else is sanded out. Went ahead, cleaned all the areas that we're gonna just spot prime. So any area that had pinholes on, all of those panels, we're just gonna put a touch of high build primer on, make sure they're good to go. So let's go ahead and mix up some primer, get these suckers sprayed out, and then I'm gonna pick this video back up tomorrow. Thinking tomorrow we might spray out some stuff paint wise, which is making me very, very nervous. Everything is sprayed out and it looks perfect. I'm stoked. Here's all of the wide body panels and pieces, every single piece of the Mountain Rider kit. Took a lot of work, a lot of love and shaping and filling to get here, but we did it finally. And I never mentioned how freaking flat everything is, how some of the pieces were super wavy before. We jumped into that project having really no idea what to do. And I know they're a matte finish right now, but yeah, it's actually impossible to tell because they're all not shiny. But when you first spray the primer, everything's glossy and you can look at it and it's like sick. We did it. I'm stoked. I'm gonna finish up a few things here at the shop tonight. I'm not gonna record anything just because I wanna get some stuff done and done fast. And then I'm thinking tomorrow we can set up the booth. Tomorrow's supposed to be 70 degrees outside, so that will help a little bit with not having to get the shop super warm. Even though we do have a booth, it's an inflatable, portable, inflatable blow up paint booth, I'm still gonna set it up in the shop. And the reason for that is because just in case we're having problems, I don't wanna be stuck outside If it turns to night and gets like 40 degrees, we'll be screwed. So yeah, that's where we're at. Sick. All right, my friends, it's the next day. Today is paint day. Probably not for everything, but for quite a few, at least some parts are gonna get sprayed out today. We need to run through, block all of these wide body panels out with 400, get all that primer flattened out, smoothed out, make sure they're 100% perfect, good to go, so they look spotless underneath the paint. So that is the first mission of the day, get all of these parts ready to go. All right, everything is sanded down, 400 grit, good to go, nice and flat. From here, I'm gonna go through with some soapy water, some Dawn in a squirt bottle, and a new red scuff pad, and just make sure everything is 100% scuffed up, cleaned up, ready to go. So I think the initial batch of parts that we're gonna spray is gonna be all of the wide body panels, of course. I don't think I'm gonna have space for the doors today, doors or the hatch. If we can fit the fenders and wing and whatnot in there, that'd be cool too. But I also wanna get the bumpers sprayed out at the same time. Every single part, except for the jams on the doors and some jam stuff on the car, is ready to spray. So technically, if we could get everything except for the car and doors and hatch sprayed today, that'd be super cool. I just don't know if the booth is gonna be big enough to fit all that. It's a 20 by 30, so I guess we're gonna see. But for now, let's just run through with that red scuff pad, hose it down with water, blow it off with compressed air, and I'm gonna let them sit outside in the sun for a couple hours, make sure they're 100% dry, ready to go. So when we're spraying, no water pops out of some random holes. So here are all of the parts that I cleaned up, prepped out, and all of these should be ready to be sprayed out. I was gonna do the bumpers at the same time. I don't think there's gonna be enough space for it. If we go ahead, set up the booth, and there's a ton of extra space, then I'll go ahead and throw the bumpers in there as well. The last thing I want is to be tripping over parts, knocking stuff over. So yeah, if we can get all this sprayed today, that'd be sick. And also, little change of plans, I'm gonna set up the booth outside. It is 11:30 in the afternoon right now, and it's already over 70 degrees, and in the direct sunlight as well. It's probably gonna be quite a bit warmer if we set the booth up outside. So that is the plan. I cleaned off a little area right out front, and if it doesn't work out, it'd be easy enough just to pull the cars outside, slide the booth in, and do it that way. Booth is right here. Here's one of the blowers. Another one is in the truck. Let's go ahead and get this thing opened up, get it all set up, and see how big this thing is.